Hi, Nathan. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, John, thanks for having me here. It's awesome to be here.
Well, I'll thank you for wanting to be back on the show. I offer that to everybody that I speak with, and a few people, you're one of them, has written another book and called me up and said, "Hey, you want to talk about your book?" This one is called the Sapien Empire: The Realms of Restarted Civilization.
hmm
It's part of the Sapien Empire series, is it not?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's book two of an eight-book planned series.
And you were just telling me that it was released a couple of days ago, just this past week. And this is November 2024. So why don't you catch us up on who you are, what part of the world you live in, and what got you to write these books in the first place?
Hey, everyone. So I'm Nathan Ogloff, the author of the Sapien Empire series of books. I currently live in Vancouver, British Columbia, and this whole endeavor is a long time coming. So I committed to writing a book in 2013, back when I thought this was going to be just one book, ended up exploding into a series of books, but I think given the scope of what I'm doing, that's understandable. And so I had an idea for a book, and what's your Toni Morrison once said, if you have an idea for a story and it doesn't exist, you're the one who has to write it. So no one was going to write this book but me. So I committed in 2013, thought it was going to take 2 years to get released. 9 years later, I finally got it done. Looked for an agent for a year, couldn't find one, decided to self-publish. First one came out in February of this year, and the second one just came out last Wednesday.
This is a kind of a dystopian, post-apocalyptic kind of story.
hmm
There's a lot of those kind of stories, and I talked to quite a few authors on this channel about that kind of thing. But yours is very different. Now, we've had conversations about it. You were a guest on before. And tell us what makes yours different.
So for starters, it's post-apocalyptic sci-fi, but the twist that I've given is it starts at the end of the post-apocalyptic era because civilization's making a comeback. They're going to start to rebuild, and then the whole series explores why making a better world is easier said than done. Um, yeah, and like also people will often ask me like, well, what caused the collapse? And so that's also where I'm different because most post-apocalyptic, it's a singular collapse, like everything's fine. Suddenly something happens, asteroid, nuclear war, zombie viral outbreak, things go to crap. Mine is the backstory is the 21st century. There's a long, slow decline of human civilization, very analogous to what you see in actual history, for like the Romans, for example.
Hmm.
That happens over the course of the 21st century. And then in the 22nd century, early 22nd century, because I just kind of wanted to add this event, there's an event called the All Silence that happens, which fries electrical grids across the planet and bathes the atmosphere in hues of blue, green, and red. And so that's just the final bullet to the head of this already dying corpse that was human civilization and the backstory of my novel. And then the first novel starts at an unspecified time, a couple of centuries after that event, and then I pick it up from there, and I that's where the story begins.
And I guess there's a lot of character development in your first book that led you to consider writing a second, and who knows, maybe a whole series. How many books do you think you're going to be writing about this?
So if people go to my website, nathanogloff.com, there are eight planned. I do have all the names out. As a matter of fact, I've actually already outlined novels three and four. I've started reading the outlines to my critique group just as a sort of like, what do you guys think? Versus like, hey, look at this fun little thing I made. Everyone go ooh and ah. So and I actually did start writing the third book last week. So yeah, the gears are in motion, and I'm making this happen.
Okay. I'm personally curious because I'm a Canadian, you're a Canadian, and I tried to make a go of it with music back in the 80s. I don't know what it's like now to be an artist that's in Canada. Do you have some ways of breaking into an American market or a worldwide market somehow through your publishing?
Well, since I'm self-published and everything's online, I mean, my books are all on Amazon.com. So, I mean, I also use Drafted Digital. It'll put it to a bunch of different markets. So there is like UK, Australia, that
Of course.
most of it's just English market at the moment because I don't have any translation rights. Again, it's just me. So um, the internet nowadays really just it makes it very easy to just put it out there, and
Hmm.
anybody with any grasp, I guess you could say, of the English language can find it. I also do use book promo sites and trying to get into newsletters to get
Good.
uh, people to notice it and download it. As a matter of fact, I ran a free promo the first week of November, and I managed to get 3,000 downloads out of that. So I was
Oh,
quite
great.
happy. I reached number one in three different categories on Amazon KDP or Kindle free ebooks. So breaking into the US market, I just want as many people as possible on the planet to see this.
Yeah.
So every market, ideally, I would like to get into. But if I want to start small, then yeah, definitely just breaking into the US market isn't really that much of a barrier or a challenge to me. I mean, I think in a sense I already have.
Okay. All right. Now, you have I have talked about your project here and how devoted you are to it, and I certainly wish you well in the project because I think it's a great story. And I can keep asking questions about the storyline. For instance, in your second book, I see on the cover there's all kinds of vehicles there. It looks like some pretty high-tech stuff going on. How does that function in a world that's had such devastation given to it?
So in the first book, how I explain it is like there's kind of two different types of societies. Like there's these remnants of these city states that used to exist, um, which you kind of think of as dystopian, like typical dystopian. And then outside of that, there's areas that are like more like what we think of as post-apocalyptic. And so I do have that sort of dynamic going on. So these city states, they have the faintest embers of civilization, have like the foundation of it. Like they know how to make a gas engine, they know what money is, they know what
Okay.
like concrete form working is. Like they have access to, they can make electricity. So like um when you have that foundation, it is a lot easier and quicker to just go from there and build back. And as for the cover, what you're actually saying is it's something called a grid base, which as they expand out in order to secure and hold their territory, they make these things called grid bases.
Okay.
And then they have like vehicle bays and docks and all that for them, and vehicles can just move out from there. And that's actually what you see in the rivers too, is you see these little vehicles called amphibians. Because they use watersheds as natural highways because they don't have road infrastructure in the very early stages. And so
Okay.
that's exactly what you're saying on
Okay.
this covered the second book.
All right. Now, what kind of characters play a role in the protagonist and the antagonist? I suppose you have those kind of things going from one series to the next.
Yeah. So the protagonist is a man named Shindo Dekan, and he's gifted in all things engineering. It's actually the focus, one of his main roles he plays in the book. But the downside is he has a bit of a sociological disorder. He can't quite read people, and so he needs like special help with that. Um, and then you have your villain, which is like your typical brutal, boisterous, um, warlord villain that you think of when you think post-apocalyptic. And and there's a villain in the first book, Vibrant Magrite, who if you start reading the first book, you'll get quickly introduced to him. He's a pretty big guy. Just don't look at him the wrong way, stuff like that. And then there's a character I introduced later in the first book who actually helps Shindo and becomes a dual head of state with them as they both really start to rebuild civilization. And she it plays a pivotal role in sort of helping Shindo understand the direction they're going to go as they rebuild civilization, how to understand people.
Mhm.
Uh, Almost, I guess you could say, like a big sister figure, so to speak, for him. And so, without giving too much away,
Yeah.
those are uh, three characters that you'll quickly see when you start to pick up my books.
Okay. What's your plans for these? You said eight books you have plans
Mhm.
for. Are they going to be continuous, or there will be some massive time jumps, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the whole plan for the series is actually supposed to take place over 200 years.
Okay.
So each book does like the beginning jumps, and then often I have each book is split into two parts, and so there's a jump between each part. So the first book ends 13 years after civilization starts to get rebuilt, and then the first part of book number two starts 12 years after that, so it's 25 years, and then the third book starts 40 years after they started to begin to rebuild civilization. So there is that happens because I mean rebuilding the world isn't going to happen
Yeah,
overnight. It's
exactly.
going to
Sure.
take time, and so yes, I do definitely have time jumps while trying to make it uh, continuous and not not have gaps in the
Yeah,
or plot holes in the story.
for sure. Are there going to be any descendants of your protagonist, some offspring of sort? Should we look forward to that?
No, so I mean, it sounds a little odd, but the protagonist will be present through all eight books, and you guys are wondering it's 200 years. Well, I explained this in the beginning of the first book, is that there's a subset or very few people that they're called the long-lived, where they can easily live past 100 years for just um, it's implied like just genetic reasons.
Okay.
And then Shindo, spoiler alert, in the third book, we'll quickly find out like he's gonna have a moment where he's like, "Hey, I think I am one of the long-lived," and so that will be a factor in why he'll be alive for so long
Yeah.
throughout the book series. So
Cool.
yeah.
All right. The world is going through some changes right now, and we're living through it all here in Canada and down in the United States as well, and around the world. Uh, what's your personal view for the future? How do you see 100 years from now?
I mean, I don't want to say I'm predicting that our society is going to collapse, but I mean, my whole beginning with this book series was a documentary from 2009 called Earth 2100, which basically
I,
talked about our resource
I saw
usage
that.
and
Yeah.
how if we don't manage it properly, like we're going to start having serious problems, and it's possible by like the late 21st century. Um, by the late 21st century, we're just gonna collapse, and we're gonna again suffer that slow whimper collapse that you see often in history. And so I, I don't want to say that'll happen. What a lot of people don't talk about is, I mean, the population of the world is getting larger and there's a lot more resource usage. But what most people don't talk about is they're predicting in the second half of the 21st century, there's going to be a sharp population decline, which could cause problems. And so um, I want to say AI and robotics may be able to mitigate that. I'm not sure. Um, but to make a long answer short, I'd like to remain hopeful, and that having this attitude of we're screwed, all hope is lost, that's just as bad as actively destroying it. And so,
I think so.
how do I feel? It won't be a utopia in the late 21st century, but I think my book, um, showing a collapse in the 21st century and sort of like, here's the mistakes we made, here's how we can avoid it, could actually help us avoid a collapse in the first place. And so I've told people I'm not qualified to fix the world's problems, but I know that our world's complicated, and complicated problems require complicated solutions. So it won't be a utopia in the late 21st century, but I think we'll still be around.
Oh, let's see. Do you want to give a elevator pitch for your two books and encourage people to pick that up, maybe for Christmas or for a good read, and to continue following you on Amazon and on your website?
Yeah, if you guys are interested in post-apocalyptic sci-fi where civilization's making a comeback, and if you like Silo, Metro 2033, you like Dune, Mad Max, Fallout, definitely pick up my book because you guys are in for a wild ride and you will not be disappointed.
Excellent. And you're always welcome back, Nathan. I
Thank you.
mean, when do you think your third book is going to be out?
It's probably going to get delayed till 2026.
I'll still be here, and
Okay.
I'd love to have you back as a guest.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I wish you all the best with your books. They sound fascinating and one of my favorite subjects, and you cover it in such an intriguing way. I just may have to order the first one and get into that.
Do it and leave me a really good review, right?
Okay, of course I will. All right.
Thank you.
You take care, mate. Bye-bye.
Take it easy.
Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, and if you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then I invite you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment if you wish. And if you are an author, I would sure love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing, and remember to be kind to one another.